Welcome to our next module, Module 5, Managing for Quality and Competitiveness. This module comprises of 3 chapters, Chapter 6, 7, and 8. We will begin with Chapter 6, The Nature of Management. Our learning objectives include defining management and explaining its role in achieving the organizational objectives. We're going to also describe the major functions of management. We're going to make a distinction among the 3 levels of management and the concerns managers have at each level. We're going to specify the skills managers must have to be successful. We are also going to describe the different types of leaders and how leadership can be used to empower employees. And finally, we will summarize the approach to decision making used by many business managers. The importance of management. Management is designed to achieve organizational objectives using resources effectively and efficiently in changing the environment. Now, managing, you have to look at the word. I would say this is a nice definition, but really a manager is going to be someone who oversees, someone who controls, and someone who uses resources in such a way to achieve a common goal. Obviously, it's going to be the ultimate objective is going to be to achieve the company's mission. But again, everyday person would say this is going to be a person who's going to be going to control different individuals, different processes to get the goals reached. Managers specifically is a noun, and it is going to be the individuals who are going to carry out those goals and utilizing, planning, and organizing, staffing, and controlling people and activities to reach the goals. How many of you are managers? How many of you have managed at some point in your career? Now, people always say that managers are not leaders and leaders are not always managers. Well, we're going to talk about both, and you're going to see some clear distinctions between the two. But the primary functions of a manager is going to be plan, organize, staffing, direct, and control. I talked about control because they really are going to be, in order for everything to get done, they're going to be really controlling things. And a lot of people don't like managers because they're controlling, but that's probably one of the main parts of their role. They're going to make sure that activities under their jurisdiction are controlled and directed and properly staffed so that it can get done. They're going to make sure that they're organized. So they're going to be able to know who does what, when, and how. They're going to know who they need to get the job done, how many qualified individuals that are necessary in order for this particular department or this particular area of this manager's role gets done. And they are most certainly going to have to plan activities. Now, again, planning activities is not going to be a solitary function. In fact, many managers in the planning phase of their responsibilities work with other managers or work with their directors or leaders to make certain that the activities that they are actually on a plan are within the scope of their authority. Management functions. We talk about planning, and planning is really important because it's going to be the first step. What objectives did the organization have and how are we going to accomplish them? In many ways, planning is going to be very, very specific to the type of manager we're talking about. Specifically, if you're talking about a human resource manager, and a human resource manager's planning activities is going to be how they're going to accomplish the recruitment, the benefit administration, and the training of their respective employees. Again, how do they plan it? What are they going to do? And how many people do they need to get those jobs done? So planning is going to be very specific. Really, it's going to be specifically to the management role or function that individual will be playing in the organization. But in the end, the plan is going to be, determining what the objectives of the company, how we're going to accomplish them. So the mission of the organization is going to be really a big deal. It's going to be the guiding background force. That's going to be the part of the planning process. But as I said, these are generalities, but more and more you're going to want to have some specifics. And the specifics is, if you're an HR manager, your goals will be to recruit the top employees, the top individual talent. You're going to ensure that recruitment is sufficient and within budget. If you are an HR manager, you're going to make certain that your staff is adequately trained to administer benefits, ensure that different training sessions are accomplished. You're going to be more specific to goals within your area and in light of the organization's mission. The objectives are going to be measurable. As we have talked about before, the overall objective of any organization is to be competitive and maintain a profit. But when you're talking about different departments within the organization and different managers functions within that organization, those objectives, although all geared to increase the profitability and competitiveness of an organization, it's going to be very, very specific. And what I want to make clear is when we're talking about management in a very global sense, I want you to be able to take the management function and make it more specific to you and your job, because that's really what's going to stick. Now, we all here to make our organizations more profitable, but at the end, when I'm managing my group, I'm not thinking about profitability of the organization. I'm thinking about my role as a manager of this finance area, how we can meet the objectives of the organization by what? Planning how we're going to budget, making certain that our budget is within reason, making sure we spend the money that we're entitled to spend and no more, to be able to plan different expenses or spending patterns, making certain that different departments are aware of how they spend and to help them spend more efficiently for the organization. Again, it's all about using your specific management role to organize your job and to plan sufficiently well. Management functions include the strategic plans, tactical and operational. Obviously, crisis management, contingency plan is a big part of that, and it's become more and more important as we see different issues and concerns that happen that have not been so prevalent in the past. I would say strategic plans are more long-range goals, and these strategic plans generally are going to be from the top down, meaning managers are not going to be establishing them individually. They're going to be working with a team of individuals, possibly other managers of the organization, and even leaders of the board, possibly. Because these long-term objectives, obviously, long-term objectives are going to be based on what the board or the board of directors or any of the senior leaders of the organization decide needs to be done. And it's going to be this is going to be a very, very wide and top-down approach to how are we going to move this organization and what are the specific management roles in that strategic planning process. Short-term plans are going to be activities that are going to be, they're really short-term activities. Sometimes they're going to be one-time only activities that an organizational mission may require a department or a manager to be engaged in. And it really depends on the organization, but in total, these are not going to be ongoing daily type of things. The daily things are going to be more operational, everyday things. How are we going to do, how are we going to plan, how are we going to staff various aspects of the operations of that organization. And when you're talking about operational plans, it's going to be very specific to that individual manager's role. And I'll go back to the HR person. If an HR manager has to, plan their operations, they're going to make certain that payroll is processed timely, that reporting is done on a quarterly basis, that the EEO reports are done and accurate, making certain that statistics are done and evaluated and disseminated to other leaders. They're going to make certain that the training and also their recruitment process is done in accordance with the policy and the tactical plans that are established by the organizational leaders. So organizational plans are going to be very, very specific when you're talking about it from a management perspective. I mean, managers are not going to be just a general manager. Most often you'll see a manager of operations, a manager of education, a manager of finance, a manager of budgeting, a manager of this. And those individual managers have a very specific role within the total of the company to move them in the right direction. Crisis management, this happened with my organization a few years ago, and what happened was there were some issues of the Y2K, and organizations simply were not thinking along those lines, and they were not quite prepared. And now, today, maybe 20 years later, crisis management is an ongoing process, and it is a big part of a management's responsibility to ensure within their realm of authority that they have plans for outages, for natural events, for terrorist acts, or any type of thing that will disrupt the organization meeting its needs to its customers. So organizing the function, organizing your area is allowing your function is actually telling you what needs to be done and how to organize those in a plan that I would say delineates who does what. It is going to be taking some functions, really specific type of functions, and assign it to people. And even so, providing them with deadlines, timelines, and specific guidelines as to how this particular function is to work. And it also is using that information for measuring their performance. So when we talk about human resources, well, the one thing you want to make sure you do is you're going to divide the work into different tasks, smaller groups, and assign those type of functions. Well, with human resources managers, they're going to make sure that the role of the training is handled by a group of individuals who are specifically trained to do those types of work. They're going to handle benefits coordination. That's going to be handled by a specific group. And all of the work and assignments that relate to those particular groups are going to be organized to be given to them and assigned to those individuals. Managers really have to be organized. I think one of the biggest problems that we've seen, I've heard from many individuals, is my manager is not organized. And that's a big problem, because one of the biggest parts of your job is not only knowing what needs to be done and the staff that needs to do it, but organizing in such a way that everybody is given the job that they can do with their level of skill and talent. A manager has to know what they need in terms of the workforce, and that's hiring the people to carry out the work. That means that you're going to work with human resources if necessary to recruit those individuals. You're going to have to know enough about what needs to be done to determine what skills are needed. You're going to have to work with human resources to train these employees and to ensure that the pay and benefits are consistent with policy of the organization. The most important thing is, as a manager, is you have to know what you need in terms of workforce and the skills that are needed to get the job done. Now, managers work with organizations outside the company to recruit, but this is all specific to an organization. Some organizations don't want to use or pay a fee. They have staff on board that know how to select and recruit individuals for their job opportunities. But that's going to be specific to the organization. Downsizing. Another issue of management function is determining when you don't need a specific group of individuals or a specific person. And this is going to be the downsizing, which is the part of the job that most people don't like, but it is something that happens. Now, how do we motivate people? How do we lead them? How do we get them to do the best job? And how do we reward them when they are doing the best job? That is going to be the part of directing, which is a major part of the management function. How do we motivate people, get the best out of them? How do we make certain that they are doing their best quality work? And also, how do we keep them motivated, keep them engaged, keep the morale up? So that's going to be a big part. And managers who are successful know how to do that. Controlling the work, controlling the flow of work. This is particularly important when you're talking about when my job affects somebody else's job, what affects someone else's job. The controlling function is very important here, because you're going to be the person who is watching this process and evaluating it to make sure that everything just continues to flow, and knowing how to deal with problems when people can't, or when processes break down. And the final part of this is knowing how to evaluate performance, dealing with deviations, making corrective actions in a very, very expeditious way that is consistent with the organizational mission. This is going to be a general overview of management, top management, middle management, and frontline, first-line managers. And first-line managers generally are supervisors, office managers, or shift managers, that type of thing. And they are the ones that are going to be doing the work of managing individual people, and they're actually doing their own jobs. And this generally is where most people start. Middle managers or department managers, or division managers, they actually oversee the entire division, and they have managers underneath them who in turn have supervisors under them. And the role of this middle manager is more on a strategic level, have a higher level of oversight, not so much involved in the day-to-day operational aspects, but more of a strategic role. Top management, or the CFO and the CEO and VPs, these individuals are not daily doing specific tasks, but they are overseeing and controlling the organization from a broader perspective. More about a vision, more about mission, more about seeking investment opportunities, very high level responsibilities. They are not involved, generally speaking, in the day-to-day operations of the organization. They do depend on operational managers, plant managers, to provide them with information so that they can make useful decisions. And this little matrix here is just giving you some of the idea of people, the different types of managers and their roles in each one of these categories. And you can see the first line manager is going to be highly controlling because they're going to be really doing a lot of the day-to-day work. Frontline managers are going to be able to step in and take over if a cashier is not in, or a frontline manager is going to be able to come in, step in, and take over when the payroll can't be processed because someone is out sick, that type of thing. So they're definitely involved, definitely hands-on. But as you talk to top managers, they are less controlling and more in the planning part. And there's a direct contrast between the frontline managers, which is basically on the bottom of the totem pole, and the top leaders, which is on the top of the pole, and how their roles are going to be absolutely contrasting to one another. They're not going to be involved in day-to-day. They're going to be more in planning, organizing. They're going to be really getting into how this organization as a whole will move forward and what direction and why, and also whether or not certain types of I would say different types of decisions that need to be made that will have an organizational impact versus having, in the case of a frontline manager, the decisions that they will make will be more specific to their area of control. Middle managers are somewhat in between, but most of all, their overall emphasis is going to be organizing. And you're going to know that because they have managers under them, and they're going to have to make certain that the work is done, the work is staffed correctly, and they're going to have to make certain, obviously, that the workload is organized so that each individual employee as well as managers know what needs to be done. So the top manager we talked about is going to be those people who really don't do a whole lot of day-to-day stuff about operations, but they are important because they are going to be the face of the organization. They're going to set the tone for ethics and all sorts of other issues, and they're going to be the ones who are ultimately responsible if the organization is doing well or poorly. Middle managers, most of us will somehow leave the workplace being in middle management. Some of us may very well be in upper management, but most of us will be stuck right here. And we do get involved in day to day, but mostly we are working with plant managers and division managers in organizing their work. And we get a little bit involved in some day-to-day process, but our responsibility is going to be leaning more on tactical planning, which is going to be short-term planning, particularly as it's focused within that area that we're over. But they're going to be tapping into more planning and more organization than actually doing the frontline supervision, because they may have maybe one or two people over under them, and they are also managers, division managers, or division plant leaders. The frontline managers, I love them because it gives you an opportunity to understand how to communicate and work with people at two levels, both on a peer-to-peer basis, but also as a supervisor, person who's overseeing. And a supervisor is just that, an overseer. And because they oversee and they are the ones who actually implement the process, and they're actually the ones who's going to say, this is going to work, this can't work. Frontline managers are very, very important because they are the ones that out there in the middle of the ring, dealing with all of the work, getting messy, getting their hands dirty. They are so involved. And this is a great way to start because you can actually understand the organization far better, not just doing the work, but actually being able to help people and direct people to do the work. So you really get both ends of that experience level. But these are the frontline individuals, and their job is going to be very control based, very directing based. It's going to be really important that they understand what needs to be done and organize that work in such a way that they can direct each individual person to those specific jobs. Now, areas of management. There are obviously human resources, which I have mentioned a number of times. There's finance managers, operational managers, and marketing managers. And again, these individual managers are going to be focused on a very specific area. In the case of financial managers, they're going to be overseeing finances, budgeting, preparing statements and reports, that monitoring cash flow. Operations is going to be the person who's going to be actually involved in transforming the services or resources into goods that they can be sold. They're going to be the ones who actually are going to the generators of income for the organization, quite frankly. They will be involved in purchasing and making certain that the inventory is at a sufficient level to meet the need of their customers. So it's important that we deal with that. These are the money makers for the organization. So managing automation and robots. As you know, most of the work that's done in organizations are done using some sort of information technology, computers, etc. So digital technology is going to be very, very important in operations. It's going to be important that they know how to use technology to get their job done. Operational managers are definitely going to be involved in that technology side of it, particularly if there's a production process where a good is produced and then sold to a customer. Human resource managers, obviously, they are going to be very, very critical in ensuring staffing for their department as well as for the organization is done. They're going to make sure that they have benefits handled and performance appraisals programs. They're going to be involved with recruiting and hiring new employees. They deal with the government regulations as they relate to humans in the workplace and the laws that require them to ensure that they have a diverse workplace. The marketing managers also are important because they are going to be planning, promoting, getting that organization out there, the name out there, the marketing out there, the advertising, and even personal selling if necessary. They are going to make certain that the organization's name is known, their skills and their organization's products are known and available to customers. They're going to be actually finding those customers for that organization based on their research. IT managers are actually so important nowadays because everything that we do within the work is flowing through some type of information technology, whether it be our communication through email system or some kind of intranet or the web-based system for handling transactions with our customers online using the internet. Again, information technology is going to be a very big part, and they're going to implement and maintain the technology for business. They're going to know what kind of technology we need. They're going to make sure that those systems are upgraded. They're going to have a system of protecting the data for encryption and ensuring privacy of social security numbers, etc. is maintained. They are really the behind-the-scenes people who are absolutely vital to an organization. There are some administrative managers, and they are going to be handling not necessarily the areas of human resources, but they may handle some specialized activities and coordinating things. But again, they are overseeing and controlling and managing and directing activities for the organization. Now, here are some skills that managers absolutely need to have. My suggestion to you as you read through the chapter is to ensure that you understand the different specific roles and what type of roles are applicable to each. I'm not asking you to memorize, but I am asking you to get an understanding of the general skills that are needed and why they're needed. Now, we already know that there's leaders in the world, and they are people who, when you look back, everybody's following them. Why? Because they have such a ability to influence people that is beyond words. And we don't always know why we're following these people, but we know we are because they have something, and they have the ability to influence and to do something. So one of the skills that managers need is going to be leadership, because you have people working for you and giving you things that you ask for. Leadership is inherently needed. There are three types of leaders, which are free reign, democratic, and autocratic leaders. And knowing the differences among them is important. And being able to identify those type of leaders in your workplace is going to be equally important. Which leader are you? Which leader do you have over you? And which one do you think is the best? Think about things along those terms. Managers are going to have a technical expertise. What do you mean? Well, if I'm going to be a finance manager, I most certainly need to have an accounting and finance background. It only makes sense. If I'm a human resources manager, I certainly would need to understand recruiting and benefits, and in some cases understanding how to work with union employees. Very important. But they also need to have some conceptual skills as well. They need to have a big picture view of things, because it's not always the narrow view of me in human resources or me in finance, but it's going to be how does these roles that I play affect the big picture, in which is all the divisions together with the other managers and leaders. They have to have analytical skills and human relation skills. How do you deal with people, and how do you work alongside with people inside the organization and outside the organization? And this is particularly important when you're dealing with a retail establishment or some type of organization that provides services to the external parties like airlines and banks. Analytical skills is going to be how do you break things down, how do you interpret things, how do you evaluate things, and how do you use your intellectual skills to solve problems. and it's very important. These analytical skills are and human relation skills are called soft skills. They are not these skills where you're tangible, where you know how to balance a set of books, where you know how to prepare financial statements. These are the soft skills that are needed, and they really truly make the job function and the efficiency of the job much more effective. If you can talk with people, if you can solve problems, if you can analyze problems and understand relationships among people and their problems and issues, and can fix them, that's going to be important. And it is a soft skill that much needed by managers. So where did they come from? Sometimes they get promoted within. Somebody hired from outside. Sometimes they're recruiters have to go out and find them. Sometimes we go out to schools and universities. But at the end of the day, most of the times, promotions from within is generally how most of us, many of us, have started our work in a management role, starting with being a supervisor and then being into middle management. But main thing we need to understand is the process of decision making, and take a look at this little diagram here. And again, we're talking about just how do we recognize problems, how do we develop options and see which option is going to work, and we make a choice. Once we make the choice, we implement the decision, and then we monitor the consequence. This is going to be a very general process of the decision making process, and it's incredible because we do it almost intuitively without really thinking. So my advice, as you're reading through the chapter, think about the different process by which a decision is made, and see how well you make a decision without thinking twice. And do you skip over options, like developing options? Do you skip over the analyzing of the options type of process? Think about your role in it and see whether or not there are things that you may very well have to be more concerned about. So we have to concern ourselves with decisions. We know the decisions will ultimately have either a positive or negative outcome. We know that sometimes situations may very well come over almost without warning, and we have to deal with that. We have to be flexible in dealing with that. And also we know when to go to others for help. Sometimes we have a problem, but it does matter if we collaborate with other managers to make certain that we can see the situation analytically from all angles to make the best decision. Sometimes we have to be practical when we're analyzing problems and how do we fix it. And sometimes it means we're going to have to just be subjective and take a risk. So once you implement the decision, obviously you're not going to do it on your own. You're going to make certain that everyone who's involved and will be affected by the decision is told, and they know and understand it. But also you can't just take a step back and forget about it. You have to obviously evaluate whether or not the consequences of what we're implementing is working, and how quickly do we come back and say, okay, this is not going to work. We're going to have to revise our plan and regroup. So the things that are going to affect decision making, again, is just really intuitive things. We're going to have to recognize whether or not, the experience I have is sufficient. We're going to have to make certain that we can deal effectively with this stress and the emotional aspect of it. We're humans. We feel, we get angry, we become afraid. So we got to think about those things and how they can affect our decisions. We're going to also frame out, just how well the situation will have the impact, what positive or negative. So we had to try to find a way to be objective so that we can make a decision in the most fair way possible. And we're also going to have some confidence in our ability to decide and do what's right. So being able to keep a balance, being able to be reasonable in the way we think and how we approach our issues and problems and how we fix them, and being responsible when they don't work. So the reality of management is we spend a lot of time, dealing with goals and planning to carry out responsibility. So one of the big things is being, I would say, they say agenda, but I would say being very organized and being very time sensitive, and having relationships with individuals and colleagues so that they can work with you and you guys can collaborate. Because I think when you are dealing with teamwork and dealing with teams and dealing with different departments, the more that these departments can interact and relate with one another, the better they are, because it just gives that diverse and that different type of the difference of opinion that will allow you and others to be able to benefit and grow. As you complete the chapter, things that I think you can talk about among yourselves in the discussion forum is, what are the 5 functions of management and how to describe them? What do they mean to you? And if you were managers, what skills do you think managers need in the real world? And how do they relate to what's in the chapter? And let's talk about that, because I want to be able to see how well this chapter and how it's presented is consistent with what you're actually doing in your workplace. And as before, thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.